It's my real pleasure to be here on a panel with Alicia and Michelle this morning. And we're actually going to start our session with a short video clip. This is a brand new clip produced by a UK charity called Education and Employers. Hasn't been launched yet, going to be launched in December, but we have got the first preview. So have a look at this and see what you think.
This afternoon, we're going to draw people doing different jobs. And the first job we're going to draw is a firefighter.
I dag skal vi tegne forskellige jobs.
我们先来画外科医生。
The first job is that of a police officer.
Oh, where's our police guy? Where's the police guy? And I have a man, a police officer, Bob, George, and Joe.
赛车手应该是一个男生，如果是一个女生的话，她的长头发会挡住她的视线。我画的是一个光头的男生。
What's your firefighter called?
Mine's called Firefighter Gary.
Firefighter Stan.
Firefighter Simon. He's big and strong.
Okay. Min hedder Henning.
Og hvad hed din kaptajn?
Nikolaj.
Pibe og overskæg.
So we have a surprise for you guys right now. How would you like to meet the people who do these jobs?
They're dressed up.
My name's Tamsin and I'm a surgeon in the NHS.
My name's Lauren and I'm a pilot in the Royal Air Force.
My name's Lucy, I'm a firefighter in the London Fire Brigade.
大家好，我叫曹子爱，我是一名赛车车手。Og jeg er kaptajn på et stort containerskib, der hedder Adrian Mærsk.
Hello, I'm Kate Herbert, and I'm an athlete training for the Olympics.
Kuba nesichishamlilo singayena umfana wena ngoba wena umfana. Phathi nakho nje mina ngiyintombazana.
So how powerful is that video? That is from 2023, this year. So our children still think it is men, not women, who do interesting or challenging jobs. Really shows how far we still have to go. Now, at last year's Reykjavik Global Forum, I think a lot of us were so shocked by the data that Michelle Harrison shared around young people being more prejudiced against female leaders than their parents. And I'm very upset to see that that is not changing, and in fact, some of the other data, especially being from the UK, is also not looking particularly good. But, you know, it's our young people that tell us about our future. And it is not going the direction that we want it to, that we need it to. So in this session today, we're going to be talking about the early years, about really young children, why we need to engage with children age 4, 5, 6, and help them develop gender-equal perceptions. Now, before speaking to the panel and asking a couple of questions to Michelle and Alicia, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about some of the work that we have been doing here in Iceland. Now, as many of you will know, research shows that children as young as 6 think girls are not as clever as boys. They think girls are not as good at maths and science. Now, this is absolutely wrong, but these are perceptions held by children. Now, over the last 12 months or so, myself together with some colleagues from the embassy here in Reykjavik, we've been travelling around Iceland and speaking to children at schools here. We've now spoken to almost 500 primary school-aged children about what they might want to do when they grow up. And I thought I'd share 3 new pieces of data with you this morning, because I think it's really interesting to see sort of where we're at. First piece of data is that boys have a much clearer idea of what they want to do than girls. We found that age 7, 80% of boys could tell us straight away what they wanted to be. But at that same age, only 40% of girls could tell us. 60% simply said, I don't know. Now, we don't know the reason for this. Is it a lack of role models? Is it a lack of belief in themselves? Is it something completely different? But I just wanted to share that first piece of data there. The second one was that only 15% of the children, almost 500 children, said they wanted to do a job in STEM, in science, technology, engineering, or maths. Only 15%. And not a single girl said they wanted to do a job that was sort of IT or computer programming related. Not one said that was their sort of prime choice in career. Third piece of data I just want to mention is around confidence in their abilities, because I think this is really important. We asked children to say, were they good at reading, maths, and art? And age 6 or 7, 90% of children said, yes, I'm good. I'm good at one or more of those. When you look a little bit older, age 10 or 11, that has dropped to 50% of children. So from that age, from 6 to 11, you're seeing a drop in confidence in children, from 90% right down to 50%. So something is happening in this age group that's really making children lose their confidence in themselves. So I think this data shows why it's really important to engage with young children. It's additional information. There's so much research going on. This is just a little snapshot of what we found recently here in Iceland. But we really need to build confidence in children before age 6, before those misperceptions start to form about who is clever or who can do maths or science. And one thing we've been doing here is we published a children's book at the embassy. And we decided to do a book showing girls in awesome careers, careers of the future, so that children could open this book, really simple, big pictures of female characters doing great jobs. So you've got girls as nanotechnologists, as cobot matchers, asteroid miners, or exploration geologists. And we want children to open the book, boys and girls, and just to think it's perfectly normal for girls to be doing these careers. Of course, they've seen it in the book when they're, 5 or 6. So the aim of that is to show anything is possible and really start to engage with children from such a young age. Now, let me turn to the panel. So, Michelle, can I start with you and ask you, how can early years interventions effectively promote gender equality and shape positive beliefs and behaviours among children?
Well, I'm really energized by the question, because I like to say gender inequality is just a choice. It doesn't have to be this way. We can choose something different. And in fact, I think starting early with the littlest learners, as you've so beautifully put it, it's kind of potentially it's the ball game. Michelle Harrison pointed out yesterday that if we don't shape perceptions and offer more positive and interesting role models, somebody else will, and somebody with some really vile and rubbish ideas. And I think that later in life, people can become susceptible to that, given that we are living in times where there's overlapping crises and anxiety and alienation and a lot of precarity. So starting young and giving kids different ideas, more positive and nourishing ideas, I think is maybe one of the best things that we can do, and certainly something we should be dedicating a lot of creativity and commitment and energy to. So I'm excited to hear more about what we can do.
Yeah, great, thank you. And actually, I'd like to expand on that, Alicia. Can I ask you what role you think that education systems and the supporting services need to play in shaping those positive beliefs and behaviours around gender equality in young children?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Bryony. And maybe there is kind of hard evidence as to why we need to start young. The evidence is out there, for example, in neuroscience, that by the age of 6, 90% of the brain has been built.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll repeat that. By age 6, 90% of the brain has been built. So we've got a real window of opportunity there to work with young people to begin to shape those kind of pro-social values and to seed ways in which they can, they will grow and think about each other from a very early age. And maybe at this point, just thinking about the education system itself, and there's some fascinating work across the world on this, but I want to give a shout out to an organization that I've been involved with recently that's called Think Equal, that does exactly that. It thinks about how is it that we can intervene in the education system very early years in order to begin to seed those values and to begin to seed very positive behaviors that would lead to ways in which young people, for example, as they grow up, think about other people, think about women, think about men, think about issues around racial diversity, for example. So hugely, hugely important that we start quite early. But unfortunately, in many, many, many parts of the world, very few children have access to pre-primary education. In some countries, as little as 20%. And that tends to be skewed to the better off children. So if you live in a reasonably poor country and you're not from a middle class or wealthier background, the likelihood of you getting pre-primary education and therefore the opportunity to have those sort of values seeded from quite early is quite slim. So we've got quite a challenge on our hands. And many times as well, when we've got pre-primary education, it tends to be in the private sector. That's absolutely fine, but unregulated. So again, the quality of what goes in there tends not to be scrutinized and to be regulated. But it's also not just within the education system that we need to work, but also think about how families and communities can play a role. Yeah. And one of the fantastic things about being at this conference is that you meet a whole range of people who tell you about their work. So I was talking to someone else this morning and yesterday, and she was telling me about the work of an organization called Tostan in West Africa, working with families, working with communities, and in a sense breaking down that neuroscience that we know about getting in there early by the age of 6, and creating a module in their work that breaks that down and able to work with families and communities and stressing the importance of engaging with their children from an early age. And that's beginning to happen. Yeah. And I think we will see the results of that in years to come. So yes, the education system, but let's look at families, let's look at communities as well, and how we can break that down and really take advantage of that window of opportunity.
Great, thank you. So Michelle, in the video we watched just now, you see these 6- and 7-year-old children amazed when they meet female firefighters or surgeons or police officers. What more can we do to, really get both boys and girls to grow up thinking girls can do anything?
Well, we have upstream problems and downstream problems. So the downstream problems, one of the things I noticed in the beautiful video is that it was only in Vancouver, Canada that the teacher was a man. So already those children are getting an idea of who does this kind of care work and who teaches. So there's probably some lessons in that and the role models they're getting just in school. And then, as you put so beautifully, starting early, because the brain science is there and because we have the opportunity to harness children's natural compassion and their curiosity. But of course, a gender equality advocate's work is never done. All the upstream stuff is still there. If mom has a degree in astrophysics and she doesn't get equal pay, and her partner doesn't get paid leave, and so the child is getting all those early ideas about who does this work, well, then you're really starting from a place where you're shaping these ideas in ways that are going to become fixed over time. So the upstream problems of women in leadership, women having access to the labor market, women getting equal pay, and partners getting paid leave and having the opportunity and the social support to be involved in their children's lives are the upstream problems that I think you have to address at exactly the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Alicia, let me ask you a little bit about your work, because it includes both education and empowering young girls through development programs. Can I ask you what positive developments you've seen and where attention is still most critical?
Yeah, absolutely. And I always like to start with the positive, or at least to emphasize the positive, while being very clear-eyed about what challenges that we still have ahead of us. And look, we are in a world where I think right now more than ever, we have more girls in school, for example. We got fewer girls facing child marriage and FGM. We got more women who are surviving pregnancy. We got more women serving in political life and indeed in the private sector. So it's growing, but of course it's not enough. And I think yesterday as well, we had a panel that had said to us, we can't rest on our laurels. Yeah. And we know that that's happening across continents as well. So that's the good news. That's the positive news. We know it's good for women and girls. We know it's good for society. We know it's good for men and boys as well. So that's on the positive side. But some of those gains are quite fragile, actually, and that's why we need to keep vigilant about that. And I see those positive expressions of that work as well in many parts of the world, and I travel in lots of what we do as the British government. But it's under threat. And I think at so many different points across the last 2 days, we've been talking about those threats. We're talking about the threats that comes from a world where there's increasing geopolitical tension, there's geopolitical contestation, and there's a well-oiled, well-financed, well-organized, systematic attempt to roll back on the rights of women and girls, and something that we all need to take extremely seriously and to think about what we do personally and professionally and across our networks in order to push back on that. And we see it going online as well, and we've spoken a bit about that. And indeed, yesterday I had some quite moving conversations with members of Parliament here about, as female MPs, as female public figures, what they have experienced. And then we need to break that down even further, because different women experience this differently. You know, depending on the whole issues around kind of intersectionality. Women of color, for example, experience this very, very differently to other women. So we need to be extremely vigilant about that. Then I think just very quickly as well, other threats are coming from the climate crisis, where we are disproportionately impacted as women, but we also have solutions as well. And we need to work on that and ensure that they come to the fore. In periods of conflict as well, we see that, again, we tend to be sort of collateral damage within that particular, in those contexts. And then there's what I call the long tail of COVID. So many women across the world were locked up with their abusers for years on end. And we're still feeling the impact of that. They probably weren't given enough services, they weren't given enough support during that period of time. So it's hugely important that while we celebrate the advances that we've made, we celebrate all of that success, that we stay extremely vigilant to the increasing conservatism, to conflict, to crisis, and as well to this long tail of COVID. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Thank you, Alicia. Right, I'm going to make sure we finish this panel nicely on time, so I'm going to ask the last question to Michelle, which is, how can we involve boys more in breaking gender stereotypes and promoting equality?
So I have at home a young boy and who's very curious about what his mom does. And the other day we were in the car and he said, "Mom," he goes, "did you do it? Are they equal now?"
Work done, job done.
And I said, not yet. And but the point is that I've never pretended that even though this is not his fault, that doesn't mean it's not his problem. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve to know about both the way the world is and the way the world should be. And so we never suggest to him that boys are smarter and stronger than any girl or anyone else, and no one gets to come in my house who believes that. Now, that's not a scalable solution. That's just my house. But I think sometimes it's tempting to insist upon the perfect intervention. And we don't need the perfect intervention when it comes to this. Everyone who sits in this room is really powerful and way beyond that. And how you use pronouns and how you talk about who gets to go to space and who drives the fire truck, how you honor boys when they have feelings, how you choose the school environment or how you engage in the school environment. Now, some of this is limited, of course, in families in which there's a lot of, again, precarity and vulnerability. But we shouldn't let the dream of the perfect intervention, the global intervention, get in the way of the one that you can do today, right now, in your home, in your community, in your job, in the brands that you buy, in the media you consume. We can all make those decisions now because we can see that they're going to have a huge effect on the little people that we love.
Lovely. That's a really, really strong sort of way to end, saying we can all do something. We can do it now. It might not be the absolute single solution, but we can do something. We need to. So let me just wrap up this session by saying a huge thank you to you, Michelle and Alicia, and to say we need to start really early. That is the message that we would like you to take away. If we want to make real change happen, we need to engage with young children. And I have to say, the Reykjavik Index has been a real wake-up call. Thank you, Michelle, for all the really important work you've been doing. And, if young people are more prejudiced against female leaders, we really need to engage with them young and stop the next generation producing this sort of data that we're seeing today. So, what we want to do, help children aged 4, 5, and 6 develop confidence in themselves and get them to grow up believing that anyone can do anything, that girls and boys are equal. Thank you all very much for listening.